While we wait. No?
No, Ben, just you on the elevator.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Wait for a few more people to join. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Might
just give it a few minutes before kicking off.
Might have to upload something on Upwork to create that elevator music.
Yeah.
That we don't have to mention it. It just plays.
Was it Aaron that was saying the hosted network jingle?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
All right, we'll give it a couple of minutes and then we will kick off, guys. All right, we might kick off. So thank you for everyone for joining us today. So today is our first, bite-sized workshop, and we're joined by Sim, the founder of Pounce Marketing. Sim, thank you for joining us. What wonderful topic are you presenting to us today?
Yeah, so today I'm so excited to kickstart this series with you guys. So I think, today we're going to start off with the foundation. So we're going to start off on how to build insightful buyer personas for your organization.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a good starting point. I like it. All right, feel free to kick us off then.
All right, no worries. Just going to get the next slide happening. So for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Sim. I'm the CEO and founder of Pounce Marketing. My background has always been in the B2B IT space. So I've worked across the channel, and as a business, as an organization, we also work across the channel as well. So working with distributors, a variety of different vendors, and managed service providers such as yourself. So today is not about me. Today is all about you guys and how you can get the most value from this workshop. So we're just going to jump straight in. So what is a buyer persona? Everyone has different definitions of what a buyer persona is, but like in the simplest of terms, a buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer. It's not someone that, you just kind of just make up straight away on the spot, or you put your fingers in the air and think, oh yeah, I think that's who I'm going to be targeting today. But it's really focusing on looking at market research and also validating it with the data that you have. So then you create a buyer persona that is also going to be effective for you as a business and to help you sell more. So why is a buyer persona important? Well, there's lots of different reasons for why it's important, but firstly, it really helps to set the tone for your marketing. It helps to define the language that you use. It helps to define the messaging that you communicate with your audience. As an example, if your buyer persona is a techie, right? You're not going to be talking to them in very proper, board-ready kind of tone and language. You're going to be more technical in the words that you use for them because that's what they care about. However, if you are talking to a C-level executive, their tone is more about how is this going to impact my business? What is the ROI? So the language and the messages that you use for them are going to be different. The buyer personas also then really help you define the content that you produce. This is one of the biggest challenges that I feel that, I've noticed in the space. Everyone's like, do I create a monthly blog? Do I promote myself on social media? Or, do I do video content? Well, it really just depends on what your buyer persona is actually looking for. So you're going to be starting to create content that's relevant to them in terms of what they're looking for in this space. It also helps you understand the different interactions that your customer has with you and your organization. So by this, as an example, a lot of people tend to think that, you know, hey, my buyer persona, I'm just going to target them on LinkedIn. But it's actually through this process, you'd be able to get the insights to be like, yes, they might be on LinkedIn, but are they part of a LinkedIn group that I need to be active in? You know, are they part of an online forum? And that's a tool that I can be communicating with to them with. And the most important part in terms of why everyone cares, it really helps you close more sales. The more insights you have into your buyer persona, the more armed and prepared you'd be to have any kind of like handle any objections, any like, you know, if they're looking at different competitors, you can kind of chime in there and turn that around into a positive conversation for you and your organization.
Yeah, I think that just before you move on there, Sim, it's really underrated. Like when we were putting together the agenda for this session, buyer personas, it sounds like really simple and straightforward. Like when I was sending it to partners, they're like, oh yeah, I've done that before. But have they actually sat down to define that persona? Because as you mentioned there, it actually drives their marketing
100%.
From that.
I think that you know, even if you've got a marketing plan, if you don't have a buying persona, you don't actually have a marketing plan. And a lot of you know, MSPs, even though we think we target the same people, you know, as MSPs, you actually don't. You know, whether it be regional, whether it be, you know, CBD versus, you know, out in regional areas, you know, the buying traits are actually quite distinctly different when you start getting into the nitty gritty of it. So.
Yeah, and I think just on that point, it's really great that you mentioned that because it really determines your marketing spend as well. Because sometimes people are like, well, why are none of these leads converting? You know, I thought that this is the right audience that I'm going after. It ticks all the bills. Like, yes, I'm targeting the IT director, this company size. But unless you go through this exercise and you really flesh it out, you may not actually be targeting the right person. And then ultimately your marketing spend is wasted.
It's a good, and this is why it's the first step, right?
100%. And I really don't want to overcook it, right? Like the way I like people to think about buyer personas are that there's 5 key steps you really need to formulate to build out what that buyer persona is going to be for you. So firstly, we need to look at quantitative analysis. Then we need to look at qualitative analysis. And then that would really fuel and build your buyer persona. Through that, you also need to socialize and implement your persona because people kind of always forget this little part, right? They build it and they're like, yes, tick that one off the box. I've built my buyer persona. But if you don't circulate it with everyone in your team, no one's going to know about it. And then the most important part that people forget is that over time, you do really need to refine and optimize your persona. So if we just jump straight into each one of these things. So firstly, looking at quantitative analysis. So this is a way that you can look at your top 25 customers, or the more customers you have, the better it is. But I normally say as a benchmark, about looking at your top 25 customers is a really good starting point. And how I like to do it is I really like to map it out, right? So for me, I'd kind of either start off with the Google spreadsheet, or I'd get a whole bunch of sticky notes and start putting different things on a board. And what I'm really looking for, firstly, is looking at it at a company level. So looking at what type of industries is this customer from? You know, are they in the manufacturing sector? Are they in retail? How much revenue does this business kind of generate year on year? And then looking at the number of employees within that organization, and also kind of formulating what's my average deal size or what's my ACV with this prospect as well, or this customer. Once you get all those insights at the top level, you want to kind of bring it back down and become a little bit more granular. So you want to look at it at an individual level. So you want to look at what's their job title, you know, are they male or female? Are they, what's their seniority in the business? You know, have they been there for a very long time? Are they more middle management? So this will help you again in terms of, you know, refining back your message. And then the most important part is the role in the decision-making process. So a lot of the times that we've noticed, a lot of our clients, they only want to target the C-suite, right? And whilst the C-suite may be the ones that are responsible for signing off on the PO, they may not necessarily be involved in the nitty-gritty or the day-to-day to understand the evaluation process of different vendors. So, you know, you might want to also look at creating a different persona that's targeting the influencers in the process, because they're the ones that are really feeding up the information up the food chain. So once you start this, the next step of what we need to look at is...
I was just going to say there, Sim, we call it internally, we look for influencers in the sense, we say like the evangelists, right? Who are the people within the organization, that are, in a way, they're more important than the decision maker in a long-term thing, right? Because the decision maker might actually sign off on the PO, but it's everyone else that you actually have to make sure that you're continuing to market to, right? And that you're maintaining those relationships with. So yeah, we look for like the evangelists, the ones that are going to yell and scream internally and be your cheerleaders, I guess you could say.
Correct. And then like, if you think about it as well, like your C-level executives, your CIO, CTO, they are very busy on a day-to-day basis. They may not be, if you're running a webinar as an example, or you're running a demo, they're probably not the right people that are actually going to be taking the time out of the day to sit in on that webinar or that demo. They might just palm that off to their IT manager or someone else who can kind of influence that process. So it's good to think of those things.
I was going to say that sometimes the influencers aren't who you even think they are either, right? So it could actually be different. Sometimes it might be the receptionist, but they're the gatekeeper to all of these bits and pieces, and they might actually be more involved, or you might just consider them as the receptionist, but they're actually the office manager, and they're actually involved in that buying process. So, important.
And then the other thing, before I just actually move on, I just remembered as well, the other thing that you can look at as well from this perspective is if you have set up your Google Analytics or you've set up your social media platforms, you can actually go in on the back end and look at some of the insights as well in terms of, how many people are coming to your page, where they're coming from, the audiences, because that could be another tool or another mechanism for you to look at the data and also see what the data is telling you.
We've just got a question here. You mentioned ACV. So yes, that does mean annual contract value.
Correct.
Just answer that quickly.
So looking at all good. So the next step is looking at qualitative analysis. So this is probably the best way to help you build out your buyer persona. And the reason for this is because you're actually taking the time to interview your customers. So we're not saying that you need to interview like 25 of your top customers. That's not what we're saying. Like normally a good gauge is to kind of interview about 3 to 5, and then those interviews would preferably be done over like a Zoom where you can actually see them, you can have that level of interaction, and I'd also highly recommend recording it, right? Once you record it, you can then use that content to go back to either create some sound bites or recap anything that you might have missed. Through the interview process as well, you can possibly speak to your customers to see whether you can use some of that information as well to build out a case study for your business. Because, if you've got them all in willing to give up their time, they're more than likely to do a case study with you as well. Most of the time, people always look for positive customers, so people that have actually converted. But sometimes I also like to see if in that process, there might be 1 or 2 people along the way that you may not have converted and they might have gone to someone else. So they might be willing to give you some insights as well that you can then kind of see how to improve the process along the way to ultimately lead to converting them.
Probably don't do a testimonial on those guys though.
Yeah, no, probably not. With this as well, sometimes I know people are like, oh, my customers just don't ever have time. They don't want to talk to me. But it's also good to maybe throw in an incentive, right? Like something or a little carrot, whether that's like a percentage of, 50% off or something. I don't know what you might want to be for your business, but we've found something little goes a long way to kind of draw them into doing one of these questions with you.
And I was just going to say my experience, if you think of those people that are those evangelists within your clients as well, they can often be an easy place to start because it's kind of like, well, why do you, they're more likely to give you your time. So
I think like from our experience as well, is just simply calling up your customers and saying, hey, are you interested in helping us put together a testimonial, and we can record it over Zoom, like you said, Sim, because that's something that we've done here at Hosted Network. I just set up a time with a partner. It's 30 to 45 minutes, we record it, it turns into a written case study, it's turned into social media posts that you can regurgitate, recycle. And most of the time they are happy. You don't even really have to, dangle that carrot. If you have done really good service for that customer, they're probably willing to help you out with that. So
yeah, it might be a bit harder for the guys that you didn't win, but you definitely might need the carrot in that case.
Yeah.
The other way to look at this as well is maybe if you don't want to do a one-on-one interview, you can do focus groups as well. So in a focus group, obviously the style of questions you look at will be slightly different, but the focus group will be run by an independent party. So then sometimes customers feel a little bit more open to being, a bit more transparent in terms of how the process went from, the start of the engagement with you all the way to the end. So with those focus groups, we normally recommend doing about a maximum of 10 people in a focus group, and you might want to run 2 or 3. Sometimes with those focus groups, you can also kind of create like a little customer advisory board. So, they're giving you feedback, and you can run that even on a quarterly basis. But it just makes, number one, your customer feel valued. Number two, they feel like they're part of that journey with you, and it creates that level of stickiness that a lot of people miss out on, because sometimes we've noticed that, most sales guys, the minute they close the deal, that's it, the customer never really hears from them for a very long time. So it's just another touch point to get in front of your customers, really. And the only other thing that I will mention is that when you are doing these interviews with your customers, get someone who's going to be able to draw out from that customer, right? You don't want this kind of one-on-one interview to be like an interrogation, but you want it to be like a two-way conversational piece where, you're asking open-ended questions, you're asking them and getting that insight, so it starts a conversation, because through that, you might uncover things that you didn't even think you knew about your customer.
And I guess just on that note, and when we do that at Host and Network, that's why we leverage someone like Meryl. Meryl's got a much better personality. People are much more willing to open up with Meryl than they are myself. They usually just give me yes or no question answers. So, but if you've got that person internally, that it doesn't necessarily have to be you as the MSP owner or manager or whatnot.
Yeah, 100%. So now the crux of building your persona. So now you've done your research, you've kind of spoken to your customers. The next step is to really start to build your persona. And the first thing that I like to do is always tell people to give your persona a name, right? And it sounds really crazy, but the minute you give your persona a name, it helps you visualize who that person's going to be. And then you can actually start to formulate a lot of these questions through that process. So the first thing that we want to look at is background information. So we want to look at any information to help you build out who this person's going to be. So you'd be looking at traits like how old this person is, are they male, are they female, what type of brands do they like? Because the more background information you put in for your buyer persona, it also then helps you in your targeting that you run for any paid marketing campaigns, right? Whether that be Google ads, LinkedIn ads, or Facebook ads. The next thing you want to look at is the priority initiative. So what is your buyer persona actually allocating time out of their day to find the solution? Why, is something happening in their physical environment? Is it a situational thing? What is driving them to be like, okay, I need to start looking for a solution? The next thing looks at success factors. So what results or goals is your buyer persona expecting to get from your solution? What does success look like in their eyes? And it's more on a personal level. It's not so much what does success mean for the business, but this is more like back to why your persona will be looking for the solution. The perceived barriers is a great way to uncover what is holding your buyer back from purchasing your solution. Is it there's different factors that could be in there. It could be price, it could be a whole bunch of different things, but you want to understand what is that roadblock that's stopping them from choosing you. The next piece is looking at the decision criteria. So these are all the different things that your buyer persona will be comparing your solution between you and a competitor, so they might have a checklist that they might need to tick all the boxes, but the more insights you get to pull from this, the more you can then kind of frame your marketing messaging and your communications as well to speak on these things. As an example, if, for example, your customer is looking at, one of the decision criteria is they're looking for an easy-to-use solution. Throughout your marketing messages or throughout some content that you create, you want to start peppering some of those tones to showcase how you guys are an easy-to-use solution. You might want to start looking at some key features, some benefits. So that's a way that you can use that insight to then translate that back into either marketing messages or comms. You might also then want to create like maybe a product data sheet, which kind of then speaks on how you guys are an easy-to-use solution. The next one looks at the buyer's journey. So this starts all the way at the beginning of the process in terms of how your buyer starts to build awareness for what they're looking for. Like, how are they researching the ideas and solutions all the way to the consideration phase and the conversion phase until they finally convert to be a customer. So throughout the different touch points, you'll be able to then plot your different marketing messages along the way to aid in that conversion piece. So what I've done for you guys is I have created a buyer persona. So I would love for you all to meet Mark. Mark is my buyer persona that I've created completely from just me pulling things out, right? Please do not copy this and just copy and paste this for your organization because it's probably not going to be relevant. But I just wanted to give you a high level overview in terms of what a buyer persona could look like and how you can flesh it out. This is, again, just a guide, and you will need to elaborate on this a lot more for your business. And we will be sharing with you a buyer persona template as well that you guys can start using to flesh this out for yourself. So good old Mark, his background, he's an IT manager. He's about in his 40s to his 50s. When you're building out your buyer persona, there's always two sides of the coin. Some people are like, yes, you have to give a specific age, but I'm always like, I'm fine to do a little range in terms of how old they might be. You want to look at what his education is. So in this case, Mark has completed his bachelor's degree of computer science. We've got his rough salary in there. How long he's been in the role. And the other thing that we've got in there is who he reports to. So in this case, Mark reports to the operational leadership team. This again helps you kind of build out who that person's going to be, what their interests are, and also throw in what some of their hobbies might be. And the reason for this is because when you are running paid marketing campaigns or any type of digital advertising, this fuels into your targeting parameters. As an example, you'd be able to, if you know that Mark loves to play golf and he's always hanging out at, a particular golf course, you can also run like targeted Google ads that are kind of, showcasing that in that area or that vicinity, and your ads might pop up as an example.
I was going to say, the age is a very basic example, but, with paid advertising, because you can do demographics targeting in that sense, which is what this is about, right? There's no point in keeping it open-ended. An 18-year-old is very unlikely to be a IT manager, but also someone in their 70s is also very unlikely to be an IT manager. So keeping that, range specifically helps you, be more targeted, which is what this is all about.
Just in this
100%, Ben.
Just in this background section or in this buyer persona, is this where you would have things like where they would be like hanging around? So let's say, for instance, it's an IT manager, he's in an IT group on Facebook, or he's on a Reddit, I don't know, channel, if that's the right terminology.
Yeah, I would use that more like...
It's now a terminology that I've coined, okay.
I would use that a little bit further down in some of the other kind of areas, but gotcha. Here I love looking at where he might live as well. Like, so even just kind of like a rough area. So, you can kind of say that he lives in New South Wales, but you can also kind of put it into a specific area. So he might be living in Blacktown as an example, but the more granular you can get with those things, it really does help your targeting that you do for any marketing.
I was just going to say that this kind of isn't just important for you to understand, but as like you touched on before, circulating internally. I think you're going to talk about it as well. But for your salespeople, but if you're going to outsource marketing and get, like you've touched on a few times, paid advertising and things like that, this ensures that you're getting that return on investment. That they're actually focusing in the right areas. So it's not always just about you, but it's like you may know who they are, but it's really important to make sure other people that you're dealing with to drive business actually understand who you're meant to be targeting.
Correct. And I think it's really funny, Ben, because every time I run like these workshops, like everyone's like, why would we need to know this information? Like, why would we need to care if he wears Louis Vuitton or he goes to Lowe's or if he goes to Kohl's for shopping? And I'm like, as crazy as it sounds, it really does help from a marketing perspective because it really aids in your targeting, So I want everyone here on the call today not to think of this as a silly exercise because there is no right or wrong when you create your buyer persona. Have a little bit of fun with it because I can guarantee you if you get this right, the results that you'll start seeing in your marketing will definitely start to increase tenfold. The next thing is looking at the priority initiative. So good old Mark, he always seems to respond to user needs. He's always fielding tickets from, all aspects of the company. He's probably facing it hard now that we're currently, in lockdown and everyone's working remotely. So he's really spending a lot of his time fighting a lot of fires and fixing problems. So his priority initiative is that he's triggered by his bosses and they're putting a lot of pressure on him because maybe there might have been a small data breach in the organization or, something has happened in the organization that people can't work anymore, and this is impacting productivity, it's impacting ROI. So this is kind of why he wants to start seeking a solution. So success in Mark's eyes is that he really wants to keep his user base happy, but he also wants to balance that out by keeping his management team happy. He wants success to him looks at actually being able to focus and doing his job well on IT support, but not really focusing on security. The next thing we want to look at is some of the perceived barriers. So, when we're looking at perceived barriers, Mark might find that, throughout the process, he's realized that the solution may not have all the features. He might also come in with an internal barrier that his management team might not see the need for the solution because management might be like, hey, Mark, this is your job. Why are you not doing it? Why do we need to pay additional money to find a solution when you are the solution? So that might kind of be a little bit of a roadblock. I know, this is why he looks the way he does, And then the other perceived barrier is that there may not be any budget allocated for the solution for the quarter, so then it's good to have that insight because if that is a barrier, then it'll be good to identify when is the buying cycle or when does budget get allocated. Is that the end of the financial year or is it in December? So that, again, is a good insight that you can draw from there. So Meryl, back to your point earlier in terms of looking at online forums and stuff like that, this is where I'd put it in the buyer's journey. So I'd start off by looking at, where is your buyer persona? How does he start generating ideas? So in this case, Mark probably looks online, he does his research, and then, he's also quite active. So he might be a member of ASA as an example. He probably reads the likes of Gartner analyst reports, Forrester. He might also be quite active on LinkedIn. He probably doesn't care about Facebook. Facebook is just more very personal for him. He doesn't even worry about Instagram. But these, again, if you map out the buyer's journey from start to finish, it kind of just helps you build out what those different things are. And, if he is on a Reddit channel, then that can be something you add to that as well, because then that might be a channel that you might want to start being a bit more active in. In the final piece of that funnel, final piece of the puzzle is the decision criteria. And here we're looking at, what are the key things that Mark is really concerned about to make his final decision. So here we want to look at things, it might be the cost. For him, cost is really a big thing because he might only have a small budget allocated to him. He also might want to look at some features and make sure that, your product ticks all the features that he's looking for because he doesn't want to end up having to buy endpoint security from one person, firewall from another person. He might just want to have one solution that encompasses everything. And then maybe another decision for Mark might be the SLAs, right? So if he does need help or something's not working, how can he get support and how quickly can he get that support? When I look at the decision criteria, I also like to include the role. So again, I mentioned this previously, but really looking at his role in influencing the process, you know? So in this case, Mark is an influencer, but he doesn't really have any decision-making authority. That's not to say you exclude Mark and be like, yeah, I don't want to waste my time with Mark. No, that's not the right approach. The right approach is, yes, he's an influencer. What can I do to convince Mark that my solution is the best, or I'm the best solution provider for Mark? Whilst Mark may have low buying power, it's good to identify this, because it also then you can kind of start thinking how much time and investment you want to put into the likes of Mark, the IT manager, versus Johnny, who's the CEO or CTO in the organization. So now that you've got a really beautifully built buyer persona with all the insights and you're ready to be like, okay, what am I going to do with this? So the first thing you need to do is share it with your team. I've done a lot of workshops with a lot of clients, and the one thing is we work together, we build out these buyer personas, but then no one else in the organization actually hears about it or knows about it. And the reason why it's important to circulate your buyer persona with the team is so they're actually able to then give you feedback. You know, there's different people in the organization. For example, your sales team might have additional insights that you may have missed or you may not have considered, you know. And it also really helps you identify where your persona is going. The most important thing is that once you socialize it, you also want to start implementing your buyer persona into your marketing mix, right? And what I mean by that is start looking and start mapping out, okay, this is my buyer persona. Now, should I be creating a monthly blog? Should I be running a monthly webinar series? Should I be active on LinkedIn? Should I be active on Facebook? This would help start connecting all the different dots for you to then start your marketing efforts. And the final piece of the puzzle is to really refine and optimize your persona. So things change, and obviously the environment we're operating in at the moment is changing on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of organizations have had to pivot from where they are now to adapt to the current environment. So one thing I will say is that if you create a buyer persona today, it's important to look at it in the next 6 months. And I also do a 1-year kind of evaluation in terms of, is this the right person that I'm talking to or not? The other thing is, as your business scales and grows, your buyer personas might evolve. You know, you might be targeting the retail industry at this point in time, and as your business grows, you've started to see wins in the manufacturing sector, as an example. And then through that process, you now want to create a new buyer persona focused on that, you know, because you want to be able to have the right messages and the right marketing to speak to them. As your service lines grows for your business, we normally recommend creating or adjusting your buyer persona. So you may not necessarily need to create a whole new buyer persona, but you can kind of just tweak it based on the product or the service as well, because there are those little differences that sometimes don't really get picked up on.
How often would you recommend that you review or, you know, revisit buying personas? Is it like a yearly thing?
At the very minimum, I'd say a year. The more buyer personas you have, I'd say probably yearly, but at the bare minimum with any buyer persona, I recommend, if you don't have a buyer persona, at least start off by creating 2, because I can guarantee you that there's definitely 2 different buying types that you're looking at. And if it's the first time you've done it and you haven't had one before, then I'd recommend doing a 6-month review first, just to kind of see what's happening in the 6 months. But then after that, it can be a yearly ongoing thing.
And that should sort of be circulated amongst the whole team, right? And yeah.
Correct. And you know what? I actually do it as a little fun kind of team workshop, you know? So normally
how can we help?
we tell our clients.
How can we help Mark? Pulling his hair out.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
But it could also be a great opportunity when you do that check-in with your team in 6 months to be like, it's a 360 check-in, right? So we're like, we've built the buyer persona, we've developed all this content. Is it working? Is it not? Are we getting the right leads? Because I think a lot of the time everyone kind of, looks at marketing to be like, well, where are all my leads? Or, you're not giving me the right quality of leads. But the question is, we actually need to sit down and workshop what's working or what's not working, because there must be something that's kind of needs a little bit of tweaking or fine-tuning along that process, right? And that's why that 6-month check-in, it's a fun team activity to pull together. And I won't say everyone in the organization needs to be involved, depending on how big your organization is. It could just be the heads of each department, coming in to kind of be part of that process.
We've got a question here. Can we explain service lines a little bit more, which I sort of might answer from an MSP perspective. So that's, if you think that you've got your current MSP support, might be your standard support, but you're about to start adding a security focused offering, they would be 2 service lines. And Sim, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you would typically address your messaging and things differently for each service type, and you may even have different buying personas for different service offerings, right?
That's exactly right. That is 100%. You hit the nail on the hammer with that one. That's exactly true.
Cool.
So with that, if I can get you guys to walk away with a few things from today, I would like you to, number 1, look at your current customers that you have, right? Number 2, it's to conduct or set up some time to book in with maybe 3 or 5 of your key customers just to check in and start the process. And then number 3 is to start building out your buyer persona. And you don't always have to have something in a nice, pretty document. Like I said, you can always just stick a whole bunch of different Post-it notes, take a step back, look at it, and refine it. Because in that process, when you take a step back, you might be like, well, hang on, does Mark really earn, I don't know, 130,000, or, is he that right person that I should be talking to? And you can always tweak it. There is no right or wrong with your buyer persona. So I don't want you to walk away being like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? No, you can always build it, but then test it, which is the best way to do it. And that brings me to point number 4, socialize it with your team as well, because they're the people that are on the ground. They're the ones who are going to give you some honest feedback as to, is it working? Is it not? And over time, just keep refining your personas. The more your business grows, the more business you generate, the more you expand into different services, the different buyer personas you'd require. And with that, I will hand it back to the floor for anyone who might have any questions.
Great. Well, Sim, while we're waiting, thank you so much. That was a great introduction for the first series. And Meryl, we've got a few more coming on.
Yeah. So the next, so we've got another 5 marketing sessions with Sim, and it's really designed for partners that are really new to marketing, and I guess that's why we started out with the buyer personas. So the next one is around email marketing best practices. That will be for next month. We will shoot through the details in the follow-up email today. In this follow-up email from this session as well, we'll be putting together a list of basically questions that you can ask your customers during that sort of interview process to help get the ball rolling. What we do with partners as well is actually help them build out their case studies. So if you do need assistance with that for a host and network related service, reach out to myself or your account manager, and we can work with you to help you build that out.
Cool.
Brilliant.
And this is recorded today, so we'll send that out. I got a little note there that I forgot to mention at the beginning. So we'll record this, and so that way you can look back at it. So when you are revisiting your buying personas, you can look back on this and go, what did Sim talk about? Oh, that's right.
And for the partners that have attended, I can see that who has attended. So I'll be giving you guys a buzz, and I'll be a little whip and say, hey, have you done your buyer persona? Because really,
I really hope you guys do take. Yeah, I really hope you guys actually walk away from this feeling inspired. Like I know it's Tuesday, tomorrow's hump day, and everyone kind of struggles on a Wednesday, but you know what, take an hour out, make the time to start off with your buyer persona, because otherwise it's going to be something that I've seen time and time again. It'll be like, I'll get to it tomorrow. I'll get to it tomorrow. I'll get to it, next month. But it's a really good starting point. Block some time out in your calendar. It's not something that takes about a big, arduous 10 hours, but I'd say just carve out about an hour, hour and a half, and just do it a little bit at a time. And that's going to help you as well.
Yeah, and if you have a team as well, I would recommend booking in a 30-minute session, because many hands make light work, and you can just get that out pretty quickly with the help of your team. Look, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Like Ben said, this will be recorded, so we'll shoot through a email with that, as well as the series of topics that are covered under the marketing session. But for now, just wanted to say thanks, Sim, for joining us for our first session, and looking forward to the next series.
No, thank you so much, guys, for having me. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I love buyer personas, and I was telling Ben before, I'm like, I can talk on this for hours, but I don't want to scare you guys away. I think today's session was just the right amount to get you guys started.
Exactly.
Bite size, right? That's what we're going for.
Great.
Well, Sim, like Meryl said, thank you so much. And for everyone that joined today, thank you so much again. We will see you guys in the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.